We started a series about 3 Sundays ago regarding close encounters, those in the Bible who had close encounters with God, and transferring that over to us, how we, in 2025, in Plymouth, Ohio, people of God, in the church of God, with the help and the power of God, we can have close encounters with God. We can do it, and it's a blessing, it's an honor, and I just pray today that that is your desire, is to have that close encounter with God. You know, not following him as afar off like Peter did initially, but having that close encounter with him. Who would believe that on a Sunday morning in churches around the world that there would be a subject and a person by the name of Joseph that will be talked about when he's only 17 years old? Now, I don't know of anybody else today that is being talked about that much that is 17 years old. Not nearly like we have here in the life of Joseph. So this all begins in the 37th chapter of Genesis. And you say, well, why are we in chapter 50? Well, here's the reason why. We're going to highlight what has taken place in his life to our text today. And it's not even in your sermon section. You have to kind of just listen in. Or when you go home, some of the easiest reading in the Old Testament really is in Genesis chapter 37 through chapter 50. It's enjoyable reading. Make sure you have a good Bible, and well, they're all good, obviously. Make sure you have a Bible that you are enjoying, and there's different translations, and I have most of them, at least many of them, in my office and my study, and I refer to them many times throughout my studying and preparing for my messages. Obviously, here at Life Point, at least I normally use the NIV. Occasionally, I'll use ESV and some others. But we're just going to do some highlighting. So I'm going to start back at chapter 37, and I'm going to have the very beginning part of this message that is not in your sermon section. I want you to listen in, and it will be a very fast rewind of what took place. His birth and inheritance. Joseph was the firstborn. He was the firstborn son of Rachel and Jacob, Israel, even though he was the youngest. Okay, Jacob's 11th son, and his favored among all the children. Now that doesn't even seem right, but many things don't as we read them throughout even the Old Testament. He had the coat of many colors, as we have read before. Jacob gave Joseph this very special coat of many colors, a symbol of his favoritism that furthered anger with the brothers. Okay, now why would a father do that? You know, but he did. That's what took place. Okay. Then we see the prophetic dreams, that Joseph had dreams, and he showed his brothers and mother the sun and the moon and the father stars bowing down to him, which again intensed the anger of his brothers and their jealousy and their hatred toward him. And then the betrayal and the slavery in Egypt, from the pit to Egypt, was the next section of his life. Joseph's brothers, they plotted against him to kill him. So instead of killing him, they just threw him in a pit. And they're saying that this pit that they threw him in was probably somewhere between 75 and 100 feet. And it was a dry pit, even though it was a cistern. All right, it was a dried cistern. Potiphar's house was another step or another interesting part of his life. In Egypt, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, an official in Pharaoh's guard. Because the Lord was with Joseph, he succeeded in all that he did, and Potiphar placed him in charge of the entire household. That's pretty impressive. But then there's more trouble. Okay, he's falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, And she said he seduced her, and he refused to let her put him in a position of that was not right. So he did not, but she accused him and she lied, and which made him go to prison, led to his imprisonment. And then he was favored in prison. Even in prison, Joseph found favor and was put in charge of the other prisoners. And he interpreted dreams of the chief cupbearer and the baker, and they were also in prison there with him. Then his rise to power, interpreting Pharaoh's dreams, after the cupbearer was restored to his position, 2 years later, after that, he was remembered. Joseph, or Pharaoh, he had dreams that needed to be interpreted, and the cupbearer remembered Joseph, and he brought Joseph to Pharaoh, and he interpreted his dreams. Then there was famine that he was preparing for. Joseph explained to Potiphar Pharaoh's dream, which predicted 7 years of great abundance and 7 years of famine. And Pharaoh, appointed Joseph as the governor of Egypt to oversee the storage and the food. Another large appointment, a favor that he was offered. Then there was a reunion and the restoration that took place. His brothers pleaded for food, and during the famine, Joseph's brothers did not recognize him. I think this is a cool part of the story. And Joseph just let them on for a little bit. They did not know that this guy was. It was Joseph. So he let them on just for a little bit, and they came to get the grain. And testing and the recognition took place. And as Joseph tested his brothers, eventually revealed to them their identity, and he did it with great joy. He forgave them of what they did, and he explained that while they were there, he understood that they meant it for evil, but God had intended it to be for good. And then the family in Egypt, Joseph invited his father and his brothers and their families to live in Egypt, where they settled there in the land of Goshen. So it's a very fascinating story. And so as we go to chapter 50 and pick up to our reading here, we're going to see that even though in the midst of all that went on, and now Joseph is in a position of power, he was in a position where he could have called all the shots that he wanted to call that could have been against his brothers. But that did not take place. As a natural person would do that, but he showed them grace, much grace, amazing grace. And that is why God, I think, had imparted to Joseph the special alliance that he had with him. And so as we look at this passage of Scripture, we're going to see what I'm going to call today the Joseph principle that I think that we need to live by. These hundreds and thousands of years later, the principle that Joseph betrays and the story that we have of what he did and how he honored God and how he forgave is a very, very strong, absolute principle that I think we need to look at today in a very, very strong way. First of all, we need to be thankful that we're not God. We're not God. And, there are times that people maybe want to think that they are God. Or maybe there could be times in your life when people maybe want to intimidate you to the point where you think that their power is greater than yours, and therefore you would submit to them as they are judging and as they are misjudging you. But we can see here that he's just a man. I am not God. And as we go to our scripture reading, let's go ahead and start with verse 15 first, Josh. Let's do that. Then I'll get to my 5 quick points. The 5 quick points will be quicker than probably the rest of my sermon, but I just want us to get some of this background. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs that we did to him?" Verse 16. So they sent the word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. And boy, why did I lie again? This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs that they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your fathers. When the message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him and said, "We are your slaves. We are your slaves," they said. And in verse 19, when Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended for the good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And I reassured them that, spoke kindly to them. So at this point, he is saying, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? He let them know that he was not God. He let them know that he was standing before them to forgive them, not to judge them, not to misjudge them, even though he knew all the information. He had the correct words. It's pretty amazing that now he is the prime minister. He's the prime minister of Egypt at this time. And he had every right to throw his brothers into prison with no questions being asked whatsoever. But he was able to do what he did as he looked from an eternal perspective. And as we look to the things that go on in our life as an eternal perspective, I believe in many, many cases, it changes everything. He said, I'm not here to pay you back. He said, I'm minding my own business. But he said, I don't have to settle the score with you. That's not my job. I am not God. And you know what? There's things that go on in our life that we question, and we wonder why God allows it. We wonder why he permitted it. We wonder why it took place, whether it be for us or somebody else. And I'm going to also admit to you, there are times that we scratch our heads and say, wow, why is that happening? How did that happen? And all that is going on, we don't have all the information. But there are times that we just have to say, you know what? I'm just glad I'm not God. And I'm glad that we don't have to even play like we're God. Matter of fact, we're way better off if we're not playing or trying to play like we are God. Let God do what he does. He's a God that judges rightly. He's a God that is righteous. And it's the words that I say nearly at every funeral, for example, that I have. Even if there was no testimony at all given by the person that I'm doing the funeral for, even if there's no example of a Christ follower, I still allow the family to know that I am not God, but God knows all things. And the things that God knows, he's just in what he knows, and he's just in what he does. So let's not be playing God ever, no matter what the case may be. No matter how much you've been wrong, no matter how bad that person might be, let's not play God. Let's not play God. And that's the first thing that we have here. The second thing we see as we look at the Joseph principle is this: to be thankful that we can trust God in spite of an evil, because of the world that is full of evil, the evil that is in our world. And I could stay there for a long time, and we know evil when we see it, and we read it, and we have pictures of it, and we have conversations of the evil that is going on. And there are things that we see maybe that they would say on the TV, please, this is a little graphic, and you might want to protect your children from seeing this. And we see just nothing but evil being distributed throughout our world on many, many, many fronts. Folks, it was Joseph here that was able to trust God in spite of all the evil. And here's what it says in verse 20, the first part. Verse 20 has 3 sections that we're looking at them. You intended to harm me. You intended to harm me. Now, I'm going to just stop here. This is not even in my notes, but I'm going to just stop here and say this. There are some things that maybe are done that are hurtful, but they were not intended to hurt. Now, I'm not trying to make it soft for any of us, okay? But maybe it's something that we have said or something that even we do, and maybe we're just naive and we don't think it's going to bother anybody, and and we find out later it was the wrong thing. It was just the wrong thing. That's one story. There's another story. Those people that intentionally, on purpose, deliberately, I got one more word, calculating to be evil to you or to somebody else. That's a whole different story. But you know what? That's the side that Joseph took. He knew his brothers well enough to know, and he said it. He says, I'm just going to just cut through it. You intended it for evil. You intended to hurt me. You intended to kill me. You lied against me. You were always jealous of me. And even when you had the right maybe to be from time to time or whatever, but you purposed in your heart, you intended on purpose to harm me. There is no place for that in the life of any believer. Any believer. Even if we try to justify it, even if you would say, well, Pastor, but you don't know the whole story. Folks, I know a lot of whole stories. I know a lot of whole stories. Over the last 40-some years of ministry, I can't even begin to calculate those things that have been spoken to me, and I've kept as confidences because I was somebody's pastor. And the wrongs and the things that took place and the evil that took place and all the interpretations that were given to me. And then I would have somebody from the other side of the same story come to me and give me their story of the same thing. Then I'm thinking, okay, I don't have my counseling degree. I'm a pastor. I've got certificates and I've done counseling and I have no problem doing crises counseling. I've done it through all my whole, but you know what? There's evil going on across our world today in the hearts and the minds of people. But let me just say this. In the midst of our misunderstanding or not understanding, somewhere in the life of a believer, we have to find the power and the help and the strength of God to help us not to be that person that intended it deliberately, on purpose, for evil. And that's what was said here. Who would think? Who would think? Now, maybe you don't get along with all your brothers and sisters, and I'm not going to, I'm not even trying to stir up any trouble, just like I wasn't trying to stir up any trouble before the service started this morning. I wasn't starting to stir up trouble. Now, some of you think I really was, and that's okay. Oh, boy. Why would anybody have that much hatred for a sibling? Now, some of you might be saying, well, hey, if you got 15 minutes after the service, let me tell you what my sibling has done to me or didn't, whatever. Okay, But here, all of his brothers, I mean, here it is. It says, these brothers have such hatred. Now, there were times in our teasing, a family of 7 kids, 4 boys and 3 girls, there was times in our teasing each other, okay, or even trying to get mom and dad involved, that we would try to find out who's really the favorite. And there were just 7 of us. You know, and I'm next to the youngest, and I'm one of 4 boys. And, I mean, it wasn't hard for me to understand. It wasn't even hard for me to understand the answer to the question, who's the favorite? Later on, in later years, and that's only been going, 3 years? You know, but later on, it was even, without being said, my siblings would come to me and say, well, you see Dad more than we do, and you talk to Dad more than we do, and Dad comes to visit you maybe a little bit more than he does us. Can you maybe ask him this? Well, I knew for all the years I was the favorite. I mean, I didn't have a coat to prove it, and Dad and Mom never said it out loud. Oh, I wish Dad would have been here to hear that this morning. The last time he was here was, I think, during my 20th anniversary, and he was brought in a wheelchair because he had some strokes and had one big stroke where he couldn't walk. But he sat right here in his wheelchair, no, over here in his wheelchair, and many of you came up to him and talked to him afterward, and it was amazing in his last years how even though that stroke really affected him, there was something about his constitution, or the fact that he was just this big guy that was bigger than life. He would look at you, and as you would shake his hand, he, would almost make you feel that he remembered you, and he gave you that big smile, and good to see you again. And if Dad were here this morning, he'd say, he would pull his nose like this. He would say, that guy, what's he talking about? That's what he would say. What's he talking about? I love all of my kids, Now, Richard is special, but they're all special. Okay. Wow. But these brothers hated him. It was awful. Okay. Let's go to the third part. How are we doing? Okay, we're doing great. All right, number 3. Be thankful that God is in charge of all things. Oh, yeah. Be thankful that he is in charge of all things. Continue to read with me. We're in verse 20. Okay. You intended to harm me, but, I love it. God intended it for good. We've got to stop there because I got one more point. Okay. God intended it for good. Okay. So as we look at this passage, we can see the picture coming together maybe a little bit better. Folk, there are some bad things that have happened to every single one of us. There are some bad things that have happened to us as we've walked with God, as we've served him. There have been unfair things that have taken place in probably all of our lives. And if we're not careful, we can land there and not look beyond what is going on. Yes, it was something bad that happened, whether they intended for it to be or not, I'm not sure, but it was bad. I can't deny it. I can't just get it out of my mind. I can't just ignore it. Let's read the next part. But God intended it for good. But God intended it for good. And in the midst of saying that, we might not even know what the good is going to be. But that's why this point is called We Trust Him. Be thankful that God is in charge as we trust Him. Then just admit it. I don't understand it. It doesn't even make any sense. I don't even understand. But God's in charge. And it's not just fun words to say or positive words to say or even maybe the right words to say because you are a believer. God meant it for good. Now, when he was in the bottom of that pit before the palace, okay, and folks, most times there's a pit before a palace. Most times. Joseph was not fully aware of God's complete plan. He really wasn't. And that's why I want us to relate with that. When we can see, and it says that God intended it for good, God, I'm going to believe that even though I don't know what the full plan is. I'm going to believe that. I'm going to believe it. I'm going to hang on to it. I'm going to believe it with all of my heart. There is a reoccurring theme that appears in the story of Joseph. And it's these words. Write these down somewhere. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. It's a reoccurring theme. It is said throughout these chapters. Yes, he believed the promises of God, and he believed that God would not leave him. And because of that, we have him trusting that God is in charge of all things. Number 4, be thankful that God uses his power for good. All right, continue to read. God intended it for good. Why? To accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Come on now. That really is encouraging. That really is encouraging. And as we read that, we are able to see this full story, and Joseph wasn't. It was in parts and pieces. But as we read this full story, I wanted to encourage us. I want us to encourage us to really believe in this Joseph principle, that it really is the right way to believe and to zero in on and to follow. Wow. And all of this took place because of God's love that makes all of the difference in the world. You know what? I can love you and you can love me, and that is so meaningful, and I mean that. I mean that. I really, truly mean that, and I know that you would also. But you know what? There's nothing that compares to his love. To his love. Nobody likes to be hated. Nobody likes to be an outcast. Everybody likes to be loved, even those that act like they don't. Trust me, they do. They just have a different way of expressing them in their emotions, okay? So here we have God being in charge of all things. And then we have the fact that God uses his power to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of lives. The saving of lives. And that can be true for every one of us today. The evil his brothers had done was something that God used to benefit both Joseph and his family. I have one more point, but you've got to go down to the next verse, okay? The next verse, and that is this. God can make us a blessing to others. Now, I want us to stop here. I want us to elevate that, okay? Not that God may be a blessing to others. No, I want us to elevate that to this point. You should want to be a blessing to others, and you can be because God wants you to be, okay? So here's what takes place in verse 21. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Wow. Sometimes when we hear about the life of Joseph, one word stands out to me before I was doing my study for this message today. Just thinking about the life of Joseph, one word just has always stood out to me about this man, and the word is forgiveness. Forgiveness. So let me give you another recap of the life of Joseph. I know I kind of did it in the very beginning. Let me do the ending, and I'll be repeating some of the things I said. But let me just say it this way. Joseph tells his brothers, your act was an evil act. It was wrong. But if you wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have been sold to the Midianites and wouldn't have gone down to Egypt. And if I hadn't gone down to Egypt, they wouldn't have thrown me in Potiphar's house. And if I wouldn't have been gone to jail, I would have never met those two guys who had dreams. I told them what their dreams meant. They forgot about me for a couple of years, but then they remembered. And if that wouldn't have happened, then I wouldn't have been in Pharaoh's house to interpret his dream. And if that wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't have been the Lord of all of Egypt. But I am. But I am. Because God took all of those events and he wove them together. And now, boys, I'm here to help and provide for you and for your future. How is that? How is that story for a gracious love and forgiveness from a heart that has been mistreated year after year, time after time? All of that to say that God will use your suffering to help someone else's suffering. Please don't let your suffering go to waste. A powerful story of Joseph. And I think this morning I'm going to sign up. And I'm going to sign up for the Joseph principle because it's the right thing to do. He shows it. He models it. He lives it. He demonstrates it. And now we have it. We have it right before us.